right, everybody. I've got another very special guest for y'all. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Dakota Alexander. Welcome, Dakota.
What's going on?
Excited to talk about The Hunter with you. Uh, Back the project and really excited to get it in my hands. But first, we got to talk about it so we can get it in more people's hands.
Oh, you bought the
And
project? Thank you.
yeah. So I always start off my new guests, and so I'm going to start you off here with that thing that we got to do. So I just want to know your origin story real quick. Let's get kind of a base layer of where you come from, your love for comics, how you got in the industry, and all that kind of stuff.
This is what I do on the streams. I bring out the Santa Cruz windbreaker. I'm from Santa Cruz, California. Um, Born and raised, as we like to say out there. I apologize. It's early. I'll get to why that's early for me in a second. Um, Got into comics very organically. So I was born in '79. So growing up, it was Spider-Man: His Amazing Friends, Incredible Hulk, also reruns of the old 1967 Spider-Man cartoon show, reruns of Batman 1966 with Adam West, Challenge of the Super Friends because it was the '80s, the Plastic Man Adventure Hour, I want to say, as well as like things like Voltron and everything like that. So those were around me at all times. And then my neighbor actually had comic books, and was introduced even to the official handbooks of the Marvel Universe at a very, very, very young age. So this whole pantheon of characters and comics were brought to me like as I was learning to read, and immediately took to it. And then I was always enjoyed drawing as a kid, but I was just never I was standard ability.
Hmm.
And then but around the age of like say 8, I had my the handbook, the deluxe handbook. So I was using the Mike Zeck Captain America image and just kind of sketching it, and suddenly the wires all started to connect, and I was able to kind of figure out how to make the images, and then slowly but surely. But I really, really went full bore into drawing that time. Big John Byrne fan, so he was an influence on a lot of that. And then comics history was was pretty standard. I was reading what was out at the time, of course, but since I was a Byrne fan, I was really into a lot of back issues. So while it was like the mid late '80s, I was also collecting a lot of stuff from the early '80s. Fantastic Four, Captain and Captain America, and then I had all the classic X-Men reprints, but also like a subscription to Spider-Man and X-Men. My first subscription issue of Spider-Man was Spider-Man 300. That came
Oh,
to me in the
nice.
mail. Yeah. My first subscription issue to Iron Man was Iron Man 200. My first subscription issue to X-Men was The Fall of the Mutants. Just really, really, really incredible timing
Yeah.
for these game changing moments in their stories. Uh, Big fan of McFarlane and Jim Lee. Moved on to Image when I was a kid, right when they came out. Um, and then Sin City, Hellboy, and those things as I was getting a little bit older. Got out of comics when I was like probably the latter half of high school. Just partied, got into punk rock, got into bands and things like that. In 2006, I moved to Japan and have been there ever since. So going on 19 years this year, which is why it's 8 o'clock in the morning. It's 8:16 a.m. in the morning here, and I look so incredibly enthusiastic to be here. And it's there. I woke up about, let's say, 45 minutes ago.
Yeah, the time difference. We're talking about like what, 11 hours between us. So,
No, no, yeah, it's 13 hours. It's 13 hours,
yeah.
and it would have been 14 if we had done this interview about a week ago. So it
Yes,
would have been
daylight
9
savings
o'clock
time
for
is so
me.
much
I would have
fun.
been I'd have been a little bit chipper. The wheels would have been moving a little bit faster for me. But
Yeah, and everyone
thanks,
out there, he
daylight
agreed
savings
to
time.
this pre daylight savings time. And if he's anything like me, where I live in a place that has daylight savings time, and I didn't even realize it till I looked at my clock, and I was like, "Why is that an hour behind?" Uh,
Folks, there's no daylight savings time in Japan, and we've been doing just fucking fine. I'd like to mention. The trains and the buses run completely on time. We all get to work. I don't know. And we just look at you guys like, sure.
yeah,
Sure. They, some Japanese people are like, hey, we could use that. And like all the Americans are like, don't you fucking dare.
it's, just shut up now.
um, Along with drawing, when I wasn't that into comics, I also wasn't that into drawing. And no, I mean, I was into drawing. I just, took a hiatus for, let's say, 15 years. And then got back into it when I drew I drew a Batman, small little Batman for a buddy for his birthday, and then and I was like, oh, I can still do this. So it was very very odd because with the passage of time, you think that you wouldn't be able, you'd be really rusty or something like
Hmm.
that, but interestingly enough, it actually taught me a little bit more patience and a little bit more like sense of precision. So a friend of mine got me into Photoshop. So about 2014, 2015, I got into Photoshop, which just changed everything because now suddenly you have this incredible tool to make the final presentation so much better. Um, and coloring and all the color effects were just wonderful. And was pretty much full bore at that point. Um, I was doing a lot of work, uh, mainly taking combo characters and changing them into ukiyo-e, the Japanese woodblock print. So, like those Japanese prints of like guys with like the wave and the very samurai focus and things. So I'd done about maybe like 60 of those. Like a lot of people from the Marvel Universe, most of the Justice League. Um, but I started getting back into like traditional stuff. I started getting into like, more Bronze Age things. I was reading, like a lot of Bronze Age or classic comic groups on Facebook. Around the pandemic, I was doing kind of both. I was doing KOA and traditional, and I got weirdly enough, I got a bunch of commissions to do regular comic work. I was hit up by this guy named Michael Finn, who does this book called The Liberty Brigade. Actually, Mark Waid is the editor of The Liberty Brigade, and he just reaches out and gets a bunch of artists to do this graphic novel that involves public domain characters.
Hmm.
Which is the first time I really heard about that whole sort of genre of superhero books. Right after that work, I got hit up by a guy named Austin Huff. Austin Huff also did his own Kickstarter called The Masters, which is again using public domain characters plus his own characters. And he had gotten a hold of people like Alan Weiss and Pat Broderick, Val Myrick, um, Alex Saviuk, and he got me on to do character sheets. And I'm a big fan of the old DC Who's Who. Big
Hmm.
fan of the Marvel Universe handbooks and the Who's Who. I love both of those for entirely separate reasons. So when we did the character sheets for the Masters comic, I was like, "What if you do them in like the Who's Who?" And he's like, "I love the Who's Who, love them." So I did about 15, 16 of those, which is actually a lot of work. Because like, for those of you who don't know, like the Who's Who is like the character, and then there's this huge like montage of images that's all done in like a single color. So like the person will be full color, but then everything will all it'll all be black and white, but it'll be done like in a green or a red or a purple ink,
Hmm.
behind them. Really fun stuff. And but it's a lot of work. There are all these little tiny people behind them. And so I got into that, and then that put me in touch with some people, and I kind of got sort of known into groups, and then just kept doing covers and starting to move more vintage, learning how to do a vintage style, which got me more work because I was posting them on Facebook, and Facebook is very much the demographic for people, let's say 30 to like 50 plus.
Yep.
And that got me that got people interested in me, and so I was starting to get more commission work doing things like that. Then but I never wanted to do interiors ever, because it's so much work, kids. It'll break your heart. It's so much work. Um, but around August, I had an idea for the hunter, and I changed my tune. And now we can go to that now, or we can go to it later. I don't really know
Well, I
anymore.
would love to rewind just a little bit and ask, like, what brought you to Japan? To Japan? Like, were work, family, or are you just like, fuck it, we're going? Like,
In a very much way, it was kind of a fucking up going. I got so how old was I? I was at the time I would have been about 24. I was 24. I was in a ska punk band,
nice.
in Santa Cruz, California. I was living at a punk house that was every moment technically on the verge of being condemned. Literally, we kept evading the city on whether or not they were going to tear the building down, and we kept bringing more people in as housemates. Like we made like small additions onto the house, or changed like the laundry room into like a room just so we could like kept getting our rent cheaper. We had a guy come in live with us who he was like a ghetto tattoo artist, but like he would like pay for his rent by giving us all like tats. And it was I was living my best life, as you do at about 24.
Yep.
I was working for Vans in the mall. I was working for like the Vans like skate and shoe shop. Just 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 doing it. Just charging it, as we say in Santa Cruz. Just charging that mission, man. And my dad and I had lunch one day at sushi, ironically. But that's actually not saying much. There's like 11 million sushi restaurants in Santa Cruz. So we had the one in that was next to the mall, and he's like, "You're not really doing anything with your life, are you, son?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm in a band." And he says, "I would like to go live in China." He's always wanted to go to China, and it's like,
Hmm.
and I learned that you can teach English in China. And I was like, "You can't teach English. You don't have an English teaching degree." My mother was an English teacher, so
Hmm.
we had a very, very understood concept of what it meant to teach English.
Yes.
Um, and he's like, "No, they'll give you on the site training half the time." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "So let me circle back and repeat the fact that you're not really doing anything with your life. What if you had a chance to go, live somewhere? You're not like tied to anything." Is kind of what he was getting at.
Hmm.
And he's like, "Would you live anywhere? Where would you go?" And I was like, "I'd go to Japan." Sushi. And he's like, "Why?" And I was like, "You know what? I don't know, but I know that I really do think I would enjoy it." And and honestly, growing up, we had anime. It was around, you
Hmm.
know, and especially like in the '90s, you had like the anime section at Blockbuster. You checked it out. You read it. You watched like Vampire Hunter D or Akira or what the fuck ever. I was reading Crying Freeman for whatever. But I wasn't really an anime head. It was there and it was cool, but it just very much existed. And living in Northern California, we had a cable channel called Channel 26 Window to the World, and it was geared towards Asian immigrants. So every day of the week, you had a different country. You had South Asians like in the middle of the week, so stuff from like, India or Pakistan. You
Hmm.
had stuff from Korea. Sunday night was Japan night. And when I was actually quite little, I probably it was when we got cable, so it would have been about 11. Um, they had absolutely random, mundane Japanese programming. There was a Japanese TV show about these three women who worked in an office, and they were given a project, and they worked hard and got the project completed. That was the drama of the show. And
Amazing.
I was like, this is fucking fascinating. This is utterly fascinating. And it had Japanese commercials, which, as I think a lot of us know, especially now, and it's still the case, Japanese commercials are like, will half the time be the singing and the dancing and just this like utter like pastiche of nonsense, happy musical nonsense sometimes. It's absolutely still the case here. Not always, but like it's still definitely a
They're
genre.
like somebody just snorted a ton of cocaine and we're like, let's just film this shit.
And you're like, and you like, and in no way is it done with irony. It is absolutely like, they're like, this is cool, this is interesting, this is cool, and we're just like, that's fascinating stuff. And big fan of the films, but I like Japanese stuff in a very much like, it was around me, I enjoyed it, and I knew people who went to the cons to seek it out, but I didn't take that initiative in any way. I was interested, and I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna do it, and I started studying Japanese on my own, which was really interesting. And I went, and I actually went to with my father. I went to the Czech Republic to get to study English teaching. Got a degree. What's a degree? I got a certification. It was a month-long course in Prague in the spring, which I recommend. Not spring, in the summer, which I recommend to everybody because it's awesome. And like beers are like $1, and they'll just keep giving to you. I got really, really, really hammered with some British people over there. It's a really, really good time. And then I got a job in Japan. Finally got a job. Had to go down to LA and do an interview. But 2006, fall of 2006, came over here, set up, and just planted roots very, very quickly. And America didn't do really well at convincing me to come back from the news from that point on. So, I mean, I love Mexican food in my family and my comic book shop, but I wasn't super convinced to come back. And then, you get new rhythm, and I got into bands here, and I met my wife, and so.
No, that's so cool to me because, I mean, not only did you and I have a geographical difference of where we lived. I was on the opposite side of the country in New York,
right.
But also there's a bit of an age gap. So like for me growing up, it was Toonami, and so we had anime shoved in our face. That's why Dragon Ball Z is like, it goes basically comic books, Dragon Ball Z in my life. And then I was also just the right age, the right time where video games were constant in my life as well. So Japan was always like that mecca to us, like to all the kids that I grew up with. Were like, one day we got to visit Japan. Like that's where they make the video games.
What trips you out is that is what gets through, and what is popular here, what is really designed more for a Western market. I didn't realize that there were anime that were like, yeah, we're not gonna make any money here, but the Yanks, the people in the West, like they'll eat it up. So I'll give you a great example. You get here, and speaking of Toonami, obviously Toonami is the game changer for how anime is received in the West.
Yes.
Before it was like we had to search it out, and Toonami's like, no, just have it. And it'll do the job for you. But you get here, and every single person's like, Cowboy what? Bebop? Cowboy Bebop. Okay. No, never heard of it. No one knows it. No one fucking knows it. And then I very recently learned it was actually designed for a Western market because, what is popular here. Dragon Ball is a standard, but like I'll ask some of the kids now, and I'm like, hey, do you like Dragon Ball? And they're like, and they'll start talking to each other, and like maybe someone in the room will know about it, and they're like, oh, is it? yeah, you're just like,
Well,
Dragon Ball does more money than Spider-Man probably does at this point in America. It's
yeah.
hilarious.
Well, it's funny watching because I have a few nephews who are a bit older now, and watching them and they're big anime heads, and the stuff they're watching and reading in manga. One Piece being the big like shining example is just like much more into the Japanese culture from what I can perceive from New York looking out in um, than anything I was watching at that time, and it's interesting to see that while your generation walked so I could jog, I jogged so they could run because now they're getting like all this shit, and I'm still taking advantage of it in my late
Totally.
30s, but it's still just
You're like,
fascinating to be like,
what is
man, they're
that?
into
What is
some
that, little
crazy
weeb?
shit, man.
Hey, little weeb, what do you got there, little weeb? I walked so you could run. You ran so they could weeb.
Well, that's what makes me laugh all the time because in my family, if you're not picking on each other a little bit, like that means there's something wrong. Like my
Oh,
father's
you
the
are from
type
New
that,
York.
yeah,
Okay.
he picks on you, he likes you. So if you're watching the video, you can see behind me everything that's going on, and then I'll go to my nephew who's now like he's 22, and I'll just be
Oh
like,
shit! Wow.
and
Oh, that's crazy.
he'll be like, man, new episodes of One Piece are coming out. And I'll just be like, fucking nerd.
We got a mountain in front of the house and say welcome and says go fuck yourself. Home sweet home. You think you're better than me? Huh? Huh? Go fuck yourself. Fucking nerd.
Awesome.
I do that with Judah so much because Judah is like so immense. Judah Rad, old friend of mine, actually, put us Chris and I together. Set
It
this
is
up.
the owner publisher for Trouble Studios who's publishing the book we're going to talk about here in a minute. Yep.
And he's always like he and I have a lot in common taste wise and interests and things like that. And but he's always trying to get me like into like check out the show, check out this book, check out this that
Hmm.
and I absolutely buy into his sense of taste. I'm just very busy because I'm always constantly drawing. And I don't
Hmm.
want to invest in learning anything new. But sometimes he's like, you gotta check this out. I'm like, fucking nerd. You
Well,
gotta
actually,
check this out. Doing that real classic like asshole jock thing that we all grew up on, just like, oh yeah, check out my comic book.
it's so much better too when you say that and you have a graphic tee of like usually for me it's Rom the Space Knight.
I never owned a ROM book, but I fucking love ROM. I think the design for ROM just kicks ass.
Yep.
As just this like he's like got this toaster head and this box body and it's like super it's just super odd, but I fucking love ROM. And if anyone should get like some kind of media treatment, it should just be ROM. So I just think it's so cool, man. I've drawn quite a bit of ROM art. And I
I,
actually made one that I turned into the side imagery for like a midway game. Like if ROM was like a video game in the 80s, I
mhm.
actually made like video game arcade box art. I love ROM, dude.
Oh, that's dope. Yeah. I that like era, that like late 70s to like early to mid 80s comics where like it felt like the storytelling was maturing to a point
Yes.
where it wasn't just and then Spider-Man walked down the street.
Right.
But the art still had that classic comics look to it,
Yeah.
especially with how it was printed and everything. Is like such a sweet spot for me, and Rom falls right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Really
that
does.
I fell in love with that character from the moment I saw that Frank Miller cover on issue number one day, and I'm just like, oh look, what is this? I need to read this.
That's such a boss cover. You know what you could
Yeah,
do too is like you could take any gun-toting like comic character and that pose is
yeah.
so good. Where he's
It's
like
a
he's like just like tagging those that guy and like in stages he's falling through the thing. Ah, so great.
it's yeah, perfect homage cover, and that also kind of shifts over to your book. So when I first saw that Judah was publishing this book, I looked up and down the page, and I remember I texted Judah and said, "A, congrats on getting this book because it looks fucking amazing. B, how? How did you get this?" because as someone who knows Judah as well, Judah and I got to know each other based on our mutual love of 007. And then he makes his book Sharon, or however we say it, and it's 100% a sci-fi 007. I remember when he sent me that and was just like, dude, look what I'm working on. And I was like, of course, that's what you're working on. And then and then I see this, and he didn't tell me about it. I just logged on Kickstarter one day. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And why didn't you tell me this was happening? And I go, it's perfect for what he enjoys, and then also something that I love. And speaking of that time period, that art style, the characters. I mean, you even say in the page an inspiration like Moon Knight is in there, and Moon Knight's one of my favorite Marvel characters. And mixing horror and superheroes. So with that, let's do a quick synopsis. What is The Hunter, the book that we're promoting here today?
The Hunter is a superhero with antlers.
Done.
Well, funny story about its inception actually comes to that. The Hunter is a very Bronze Age, almost TV pilot kind of concept, in the sense that guy finds magical amulet. Amulet contains ancient god. God appears, says, I have been charged by the pantheon of gods to hunt and destroy monsters in the mortal realm. I need an avatar, be my avatar. So it's like if you took Dan Ketch from the Ghost Rider and Zarathos shows up to him first, as opposed to him just kind of stumbling on the bike. You know what I mean? Like if he was given a choice and he's like, okay, fine, fuck it, let's do it. And then they merge. But then also kind of like Firestorm, Dan Ketch is there in the consciousness and they can have internal back and forth dialogues. The Hunter himself, he's just after monsters. That's his deal. And he hunts them, he destroys them by performing this spell called the Shemu, and releases their life force called the Ka, which is kind of a Stephen King Dark Tower lift. We're gonna be shamelessly doing that. And then the Ka goes pop, and it's returned to the gods. The gods are collecting these Ka, which kind of leaves a little bit of a question, like, why is that going on? As far as what he does or what he can do, his power set is kind of very, very simple. It's meant to be very functional to action and storytelling. So, super speed, agility, things like that. Can leap. He's got all the powers of an elk, proportionately, or something to that effect. So, he can leap like really high, and he's really, really fast and agile, and he's strong. He also has a enhanced sense of smell, sight, hearing, and then of course like a proximity to monsters kind of sense. There are otherworldly beings nearby. It's triggering my hunter sense, as it were. We're not, of course, going to be as campy about it, because the book is actually quite straightforward. It's not trying to be ironic or winking or anything, winking at the audience. The god is Herne, who is the actual god of the hunt in British folklore. And he's connected to Windsor Forest. He's kind of a god of that forest. And he's connected to a special oak tree. So we're integrating that into his power set. If you look at his wrists and his ankles, he's got like these oaken strands around them. And he can shoot oaken spikes and then ensnare people with like these like oaken vines that'll like wrap around them and stuff. So if you're thinking in terms of, let's say, D&D or like video games, he's got projectiles and he's got ensnarement, and then he's got, range sense, proximity, so that he can detect, enemies and opponents and things like that, or track. And he appears through a mist. Stephen Conrad changes into the Hunter, or they combine and change into a mist, which will allow him, let's say, if he's in like a relatively crowded setting, to do so secretively. The book is based in 1981, which actually wasn't for the vintage aesthetic. It was actually for a narrative choice because I didn't want to set it now. I didn't want it to happen during the information age with
Hmm.
cameras everywhere, smartphones, social media, meme culture. Um, I think it would be really difficult to be a superhero publicly and to have a secret identity and maintain that secret identity when everywhere there's cameras and
Yes.
everyone could just like follow you and track you and check gait technology to how you walk and all that shit. So I thought that would be an elephant in the room, so I wanted to avoid that, as well as the kind of like ironic dialogue that we have now with in comics and in movies and things like that. And I wanted to be very a little bit more compressed and kind of straightforward. So I set it in 1981. I was already kind of into the 1980s, early 80s, watching a lot of stuff from there at the time. And once I did that, then I thought about doing it in that style, which led me to think about, drawing, coloring it in that style, which I'm already kind of doing anyways, and then finding it on newsprint and that sort of, and then at that point, you're just like, well, fuck, let's just do the ads and a letters column and make it cover to cover authentic.
Yeah. And we see in the preview images for the first issue that you're currently trying to, well, successfully funded on Kickstarter, that he's fighting a werewolf or a wolf man, however you want to do it. Is that the type of creatures we can be expecting, like more of the classic horror movie creatures, or we're gonna go cryptids with it? Like, how do you see it growing throughout the series, or maybe throughout
Um,
this issue?
so we're actually going in the cryptid, in the cryptid uh, direction. So it is a wolf creature.
Nice.
It is actually a creature called a Rugeru,
Okay.
which is connected to Cajun culture. The name Rugeru is actually a Cajun version of loup-garou, which is werewolf in French. And so it followed like French colonists down to the Mississippi, and then also connected to the local indigenous culture. So it's like a skinwalker type thing. It's uh it's a swamp werewolf, but it's not. It doesn't change on full moons. It could just change at night. It's not connected to silver. It actually has a wide range of like how you might kill it. Some say that you might kill it with fire. Some say it's decapitation. Um, During the full moon, though, in the lore, it's pretty damn near invincible, and
Hmm.
that's what provides the drama. With like why he can just keep going at it, and it seems to want to like bounce back. Also, it's a swamp werewolf, so it can swim, which was an element that I wanted to have available. So it's not just running around the streets; it can go in the sewers and things like that, which is going to be part of the storyline. Um, since we're compressed Bronze Age, it's going to be one monster for about 2 issues. So you have this issue, and then you'll have the second issue, which will close out this particular episode, and then
Hmm.
we'll move on to the next monster and the next monster and the next monster. But we're going with folklore and cryptids from the Philippines, Japan. Um, we will go to Britain. We're not necessarily using a cryptid for that issue. We're going a little bit more heavy supernatural. We're going into Canada. We're gonna have Africa, various areas of Africa, and then of course other kinds of folklore. I'm a huge fan of folklore.
Hmm.
I love Hellboy. Mike Mignola's Hellboy is absolutely probably one of my favorite comics, and especially the anthology issues where it's just like 6-page stories or something like that, and he goes to Norway or he goes to Africa or he does this or he does that. I love that shit. So the next one will be from the Philippines, and we're going to be using a creature called a Monagal, which I strongly recommend people checking out because that thing's fucking wild. Yeah.
So for the, and I know we want to talk a lot about this particular issue, but I'm interested in where you see the book going. Is this one of those things that you have a plan, like this is going to be 42 issues or whatever, or is it kind of like you feel like you can just do it until you're like, I want to move on, and until I'm not having fun with it or something like that? Like, how do you see the book evolving over the years?
Well, I taking into account how long it's taking me to do this, as well as also try to manage and promote the Kickstarter.
Uh huh.
Um, like I'm hoping to have this guy done in May, and that would have been close to. Well, I mean, there's a couple of factors why it's taken as long as it has, but like it's close to like 6 months to get like the one issue ready
Yep.
to go, right? So if I look at that mathematically, you know, and I really really go at it consistently and consistently, that's 10 issues in 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and if I take any kind of level of a break at all, which I don't necessarily want to do, but if I do that, um, then that becomes like maybe 6 years or something like that. So I approached it like I don't know how long physically. I'm 46 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be 46 in May. And how long I have to do all this work. So I plotted out about 15 issues. And in 15 issues, what that really means is that, like, we're still doing episodic, right? So I could
Yeah.
extend it, you know, but in 15 issues, I can make a big enough, underlying story arc come to a decent enough head. And I know exactly how I want it to end, and, and open other doors and possibilities. So, short answer, I think about 15. Do about 5 issues. Have issue number 5 be an annual, like a double size. Like this one, maybe like a Christmas issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can throw that into a trade. And then the next one you throw into a trade. And then, you do 15. And as Judah's like, then we do the omnibus. And you're like, yeah, man, fuck it. Like crack open the beer. Sounds like a plan, bro. Let's get to it.
So let's get to this issue in particular. I mean, the first thing that stands out, at least to me, I would hope to everybody else, is the art. And is this more the style that you feel comfortable with, or was this a choice that you're like, I want to have it look like that style I remember from when I was a kid, first getting into comics, having that 80s retro kind of feel to it. What went into that?
So when I started getting into doing retro stuff, I immediately went to Spider-Man, who I've come to realize is my favorite comic book character.
Mhm.
I mean, I still love Batman, and I was a big Batman fan as a kid, more than like when Batman '89 came out, I was a Batman fan. That was very simple progression, and a lot of great Batman graphic novels and stuff. And Spider-Man was still fun. Growing older, I look at Spider-Man much more, and getting into the Romita work and the Gil Kane work and stuff like that. Um, so I moved into a Romita style, and I was doing a lot of stuff. And if you look at a lot of my work, which a lot of it is Spider-Man, it's very connected to Romita. And then Buscema and Kane and things, and I think that those were primary influences. When I decided to do this in the 80s, I immediately thought of Byrne, John Byrne,
Mm-hmm.
and the Roger Stern Cap run is a tremendous influence in terms of how I'm approaching this, um, artistically, in the sense of sequentially. So Roger Stern's snappy style, on Captain America and on Spider-Man too, with John Romita Jr., are direct influences on how I'm thinking about, like, getting the information out, and plotting out pages and things like that. Byrne is an incredibly efficient artist, especially in this period of time, the Jim Shooter era. He had to really, really nail out those panels and get the story across. So that's a direct influence, and that's actually really molding the style. Since I'd never wanted to do sequential art, it was kind of hard for me to think about what that was going to look like. So, which is why, again, I say I gravitated directly to this as my basic template. Books that I keep next to me, and I've got a small, like a half box.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit shorter than a short box, because I bought it like the dollar store, and it's not meant for this at all. But the majority of the stuff that's in there are like, my as much of my Captain America run as I can, and then Claremont and Burns X-Men issues that I got from that era, and then Craven's Last Hunts. Some people have kind of maybe noticed that there's a Craven's Last Hunt energy going on in those
Yep.
6 panels, and that's absolutely true. Craven's Last Hunt is one of my favorite books from the 80s. It in my opinion, that and like Daredevil Born Again are like the two best Marvel graphic novels that they ever made without ever making a graphic novel. You
Correct.
know, just absolutely fantastic work. So, long story short, because I ramble, um, it was always going to be in a classic style, but to pinpoint how that would look, and also how the style is important to connecting the how it resonates. Byrne was the 80s for a lot of books, superhero comics, especially for Marvel, but he also moved to DC, and he was the main guy doing a lot of character sheets for both companies. He defined the era very much artistically, in my opinion, but I
Hmm.
think a lot of other people kind of agree, that he was instrumental in taking books to a really, really successful and wide audience. So yeah, it made a lot of sense to do it in that vein. Though the tone is not necessarily in a Byrne style, because it is trying to be a little bit more not dark, but darkish, That's what
Yeah.
superhero horror is. It's that wonderful like balance between the two.
Yeah. I mean, looking at these pages, it reminds me of Old Moon Knight and some of the Swamp Thing going around that time, and even some earlier like Werewolf by Night and stuff. A lot. I know I mentioned a DC book, but a lot of what Marvel was good at that time, which was that horror superhero blend,
Right.
and that's one of the things that attracted me to it too, because that's a corner of the Marvel universe that in recent years they've actually gotten back to, which I'm really happy about. But they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
really good at it for a long time, and it's one of those things that attracted me to Marvel. Um, as more of my like, I consider myself more of a Marvel fan than a DC fan, even though I read both. But
Yeah.
that's what made me think I was a Marvel fan. Was like, yeah, Captain America drew me in, but Moon Knight and Werewolf by Night and those old Tomb of Dracula books are really what sucked
Yeah.
me in.
I
Yeah,
got those with me too. Gene Colan and actually when Dracula came over to a Frankenstein issue, 3 issues were drawn by John Buscema, and those
yeah,
are um they're incredible source reference for paneling and two entirely different styles of how to do it, but really really incredible work. You ever get into Man Thing? Just curious.
a little bit, but not as much. I always preferred Swamp Thing, and I think that's because when I got into comics, I was handed Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, so
Oh
immediately I was
wow.
handed like the best.
Man, you can do whole episodes just talking about how great Alan Moore, what he brought to projects and things like that. That was great.
Yeah.
I actually, because I always followed art. I jumped onto the Bernie Wrightson Swamp Thing initially because of Wrightson's art.
Hmm.
Looking back between the two of them, I mean, Moore's Swamp Thing is clearly a superior comic in
Yep.
just that it goes to such levels. But Wrightson's Swamp Thing is very much the fighting monsters and in its own kind of pulp horror genre too.
Yeah. And then we talked about a little bit before we recorded, but another thing that I thought was really cool that I wish more creators did, but I understand the time constraints and that it's a whole nother thing to add on to all the stuff you have to do to make a comic. But you have these little fake ads throughout it as well that are definitely inspired by the time. Uh, I would love to just hear like why you decided to add that little thing to the book and what those ads mean to you as a part of the book.
So they are fake, but they're fake more in the respect that we don't really want to get sued.
Hmm.
So we so initially, right? So uh process is like think of character, decide to do book, put it in the 80s, decide to make it vintage, and then it's like, okay, let's put this on newsprint so that the art and the ink in it and it has that textual experience, right? And
Yeah.
I was recently back in the States over summer last year, and I find this in my LCS, and this is the new facsimile editions that DC's been putting out in the last
Yep.
year, and they are on newsprint,
Oh, I
and
didn't know
they
that.
are, yeah, it's entirely the reason why I bought it because the story is it's cool and everything, but like look at how that color feels on that page, right? And then you're feeling it, and I was so jazzed by this, and then it's got all the ads, right? And so suddenly it's this entire experience that I'm getting from it, you know? And then that clicked in my head was that the ads, which I think at the time a lot of us took them for granted. I'm sure that some of us were like, "Oh, these are really cool," or they sent away for stuff. I think I sent away for something at one point. What what I never really realized is that I pick up a book now and there are no ads. And if you're thinking from a story perspective, you're like, well, that's good though. I get more story, and that's technically that's true. But it brings back to this disposability of comics, where that they were printed on shit pulp paper with just whatever they could just do, just your standard like color palette. I want to say it was like 26 colors or something like that. And they were also like a vessel, especially Marvel. I was checking out a DC comic at the time and a Marvel comic at the time, and Marvel's like three times the amount of ads, just
Hmm.
like slammed in there. And they were just this vessel for like quick sponsorship and making money and things like that. And they didn't think that anything was going to really come of it, so it was all generally episodic, and you toss the book away.
Yep.
As opposed to now, where comics are not considered disposable by any stretch of the imagination.
Nope. We bag and board them now.
We bag and board them. I've never bagged and boarded my comics. This is my Avengers Annual 10 by Michael Golden, and the shit fell off like years ago, and it's still basically in one piece, and I still read it often. But yeah, I should take better care of my comics, but I read them too much. What do you want from me? Um, so once it was like we're going for the experience. What's part of the experience? The ads are absolutely part of the experience. And so initially I was like, all right, we'll just grab some images off the internet and slap those motherfuckers in there. And then of course you realize that there are no high res images of those. So you're
Hmm.
gonna have to do a little bit of work as it is. And then you're like, I don't think Olympic comics and games are cards and games are still around, but what if they are? Shit. What's trademark law like? I don't know what this means. So I came up with the idea of making every ad, unless like there's a few of them that we know we can get away with, like those little tiny ones, like send away for free money. And I'm like, hey, no one coming after us for that. Um, free money um, was to make every brand trouble. Like every brand in Looney Tunes is Acme.
Hmm.
And I start doing this, and this is the kind of person that I am when I come up with ideas like this, is I just start fucking laughing my ass off, because initially you're just like, this is so stupid. But it's like, we'll make everything trouble. And it's like, they won't be hostess cake, they'll be trouble cakes. Or as Judah put it, they'll be called trouble. And I was like, this is so fucking good. Um, because as much as, like I said, we're not trying to do this ironically, it is at the same time hard to get past this incredibly fun and ironic experience. So for the most part, we're going to try and keep the ads as close as we can to the originals, because we want people to just feel like they're they're in that book and in that time as much as possible. And we don't a parody, too much of a parody, even though everything is written as a parody. On the bottom, nothing is real. Don't sue us, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
We want people to get close to it, and if they notice that it's actually not that, which a lot of people aren't necessarily pinpointing initially, which is fine. We want to keep the experience as close to the experience as possible. The original experience, that is. But there are going to be some things, because we are sarcastic people at heart, where we are going to, as the British say, take the piss. So, for example, like the back's going to be like, instead of Burger Time, Judah's last name is actually Wiener, so it's going to be Wiener Time, and I'm going to make Judah on the back of it. And if you know Judah, you'll get all the jokes about how the guy looks. And so yeah. The sad thing is that, like, I've had to redraw or retype out a lot of the text and then put it through an ink distressor so that, like, it's legible, but it still looks like it's being, like, printed. Like, it's a lot of work to make it look like it's disposable at the same time.
Oh, it's funny because that's one of the things, like, most of the time I'll get trades of old comics because it's usually the cheapest way to just get the story and read these books. But I do, obviously, there's a bunch of long boxes behind me. I also buy books by the issue too. And when I get those old comics, especially things like mid-90s and earlier, I love flipping through and getting those old ads. And the 90s, the like late 80s to 90s ones are my favorite because it brings a nostalgia for me. Because there's a lot of like Sega Genesis ads and Super Nintendo ads and stuff like that that I just brings back these memories that I love. And you're right, we don't get those. It's all house ads now. It's always like when I'm reading the Star Wars book, it's like, oh, we're making a trade of this Star Wars book. And I'm like, yeah, I already bought it. Like,
I mean, that's its own thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've done a thing where I've made vintage house ads too. I love the kayfabe.
Yep.
So I recently made a house ad of a Man-Thing. Like stalking your way this October. And in many cases, I just take like a piece that I've done because they all kind of work kind of like pinups or something like that. And then I will, slap like text around it or something. For a period of time, I was making a lot of subscription ads that were Christmas based. I love Christmas centered around like the comic book characters. So I'll make a lot of Batman Christmas stuff, Superman Christmas stuff, and Spider-Man especially. And Spider-Man had a Christmas ad, and I had to go, 1985, all the comics that were on subscriptions at the time. I just, they are so. It's like you're being sold products, but when you're selling stuff to kids, there's this mentality to it that's just so ridiculously fun, And I know for a fact that comics these days are not designed for kids. Well, superhero comics are not designed for kids. Jeff Smith's doing just fucking fine selling comics to kids. But
it's ironic. We talk about it all the time on the show, but something like Dogman is the one. I believe it's still the highest selling comic of like the current age, and it's direct. Like me or you are not reading Dogman, but our cousins and nephews that are way younger than us are. Yeah, and it's about to be a huge blockbuster movie too. So yeah,
are you shitting me? My God.
Yeah.
I learned about Dogman from my cousin's daughter, which is essentially my niece because we're like brother and sister essentially, my cousin and I, and fucking precocious kid. She's like 5. She's like, I'm reading Dogman, and I'm like, really? Your reading level's that high at 5? Looking at my own son like, you get over here and you read comics now. But yeah, it's insane. It's insane. And that's another thing with this book is while I don't expect any younger generation to be remotely interested in it. Its content is at that PG level. You know, we're keeping it to that. It is, if you look on the cover, it says approved by the Trouble Code. There are a couple things that I consider to be absolutely so PG, but would not be allowed by the Comic Code. Like there's like same-sex couples and things like that. You know, things that are like still, in my opinion, utterly PG, but
Mm-hmm.
would not be allowed at the time to be part of it. But I like the idea that um, that you can balance action, drama, and things like that, and still maintain it to be a certain level, because I think that forces you to balance fun with action, and action is a huge priority with a superhero book of this period of time. So
Yeah, it definitely is. And I was going to ask about the newspaper print, but you got into that a little bit. I just want to say that's another thing that just added to it for me when I saw that you were doing that. I'm like, it just adds to that style, that feel, how what you're going for here. But another thing you do that I want to close on is the covers, and you go with that classic Marvel Comics cover uh,
dressing.
dressing. Yeah, and obviously you add trouble to it, and it's its own thing. But even having the faux Comics Code Authority print on it, and the banner on the side, and all the things that when you go to Comic Con and you pick up an issue of, let's say, ROM number 1, it's all there. It's that style for a Marvel comic. I'm assuming that was a big part of it when you first brought everything together. You're like, it has to be this for the cover.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was doing a lot of faux covers at this point anyway, so I kind of already made the dressing. Like I had a file of it in Photoshop and was able to change it. The bottom part, the UPC box area, that one was directly inspired. Here, I'll show you real quick. Gonna pimp my own work real quick. Hope you don't mind. Oh wait, the entire show's a plug. Never mind. So this is a fake cover that I made a long time ago. I love Halloween as much as I love Christmas. And down here, DC had this thing. It was just like, you know, where the action is, right? Now, since the hunter has antlers, you know, I couldn't just do the Spider-Man face.
Yep.
Fucking antlers. I'm so antlers. God, I hate myself. And so I had to figure out something that I wanted to do, because I wanted that UPC box to have something. So the line we did was come for the action, stay for the trouble. And then we put a little logo with the antlers and the hunter's chest logo. Those things are like, it's all part of it. Everything has been a study in what are the elements that you would have experienced at this time. And the newsprint thing, which actually was a little bit more difficult than I'd expected. We contacted the company that did this work, and they're on their website. It's like, we do comic books. We must have mailed them and called them, and they didn't answer the phone. And we're like, Jesus Christ. Because if we couldn't do the newsprint, that would have been the deal breaker. I would have hung it up.
Mm-hmm.
It was the only way that I would have felt comfortable. Luckily, we found a company, RA Comics Direct, out in Sacramento, California. Those of you who are looking to do newsprint for your book, because a few people have reached out, because realizing that this is an option has changed or has excited quite a few people. I didn't know that it was a possibility either until I saw this facsimile. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I wish more comics were doing this. I think it's a wonderful thing to do.
I remember a few independents were for a minute because they were actually able to do it at a cheaper rate that way as well. But that
Okay.
I think COVID killed a lot of that.
There's a guy, Rocco Jerome, who does this book called Ghost Agents, and I did a cover for them. That's how I got in touch with him. He has and he puts his stuff out in trades. He has it all done in newsprint. He goes through a company in China, And man, it was a little while ago,
Hmm.
maybe a couple months ago, and it was like China, huh? And then Trump's just like, we're gonna tariff everything, and I was like, well, we're not going to China that early. It's great. And immediately I get on the horn with like Jude. I'm like, where's our newsprint company again? He's like, oh, I think they're in Sacramento. I'm like, oh, thank Christ. It was like all the money we would have made, like would have just gone to like getting like things shipped over to us because we would have been paying like, 3 times the amount.
Well, Dakota, you've been so generous with your time, and I mean, I can just tell. I could tell looking at the Kickstarter page, but after talking with you too, just the love, the care, the passion for this book has me more excited now than I was prior to this interview. And
Thank you.
I just think I think you and Judah have something super special here that obviously people are agreeing because as we're recording this, you're over 10,000 on Kickstarter and you've got 260 people backing the book. So obviously it's resonating with people just from the images you've shown. So
Just closing out our second week
yeah.
on the Kickstarter, and it's kind of wild. We really lowballed a lot of our stretch goals. And some of our tiers, we didn't think people were going to jump onto them as much as they did. So we had to actually sell out some of them because we were like one of them had like a sketch by me, and like it was like every single day in like 4 days we had like about 16 people. I'm like,
Oh wow.
I don't want to be drawing like this many fucking sketches. Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
So
and if it works for anyone else too as another incentive, if you back it today because of those stretch goals he's talking about, if you buy a physical copy, which you should because it's on the fantastic newsprint, you're gonna get a bookmark, sticker, trading card, and then for everybody, Judah's giving away the first 2 issues of his series, which no, it's only 2 issues in, as well. So you're gonna get 3 comic books for the price of one. So just amazing, great value, and what looks like it's going to be an amazing book. So Dakota, if people out there watching, listening, want to follow you, do you do social media? Are you on Facebook, X, Instagram, any of that stuff, fancy stuff?
If you were to look at me, if you were to look me up on Instagram, it would be Drums of the Serpent, which is that hails from my old Japanese wordplot days, because Drums of the Serpent is actually like my name if you did it in kanji. Drums of the Serpent on Instagram, Drums of the Serpent also on Blue Sky. People, please come over to Blue Sky because no one's there except for like Gail Simone. Well, that's not true. Neil Gaiman was on Blue Sky.
Oof.
But no, just come over to Blue Sky. Make it something. I've never been on Twitter. I'm predominantly on Facebook, and I will actually say that Facebook has done close to 50% of the funding of this book, which is pretty wild.
Mhm.
Because Facebook's not the marketing, for a lot of younger generation. No one sees that as a vein to tap quite the same way. And the opposite for me, because of the genre that I work in. It's got an age group that lives on Facebook a lot more. So you can just find me, Dakota Alexander, on Facebook. I run a Marvel group, Marvel Fans 1961 to 1989, which has got 150,000 members or some crazy shit like that. And I'm constantly posting. So you'll see a lot of my work on Facebook. You can see we have a wraparound cover for one of the stretch goals. The $60 God tier stretch goal will involve a wraparound cover, which I'm currently working on, which I need to get back to work on. But that's the pencil work for it right now.
Oh, that looks amazing.
Yeah, and actually, since I've already scanned it in, but the background I've sketched out is going to be a sewer, very much a la Craven's Last Hunt, with some of those sewer water, very much like that Mike Zeck final issue. Love that book. And yeah, follow me. Please come and check out the book. The whole point of the book is so people enjoy it. Like honestly, I mean, yeah, it's my
Mhm.
vision, it's my dream, it's my baby and shit like that. But seeing how excited people are is nuts. I don't understand why, with all the creators out there, that more people aren't seeing that this is something that people can legitimately enjoy. And I hope it sparks people to follow through on those kinds of things, to be inspired, so that we have just a lot more options in terms of superhero content. Because I think it's great to have what we have now, but it's also great to have stuff that's a little bit more, Bronze Agey, kind of like con- that style,
100%. So to everybody out there watching, listening, as always, I'll have links in the show notes to, most importantly, the Kickstarter page. Make sure you go check that out and back the project, but also to Dakota's socials and all that, so you can follow him and see what he's doing and continue to follow everything he's doing further. And Dakota, I just thank you so much for being on today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck with the rest of the campaign, man.
Thank you so much.